Good afternoon. My name is Jim Guerin. I'm with Initiatives for China, and it's my pleasure to formally open this reception for Dr. Yang Jianli. And I also have the pleasure of introducing our host for this event. Each of us would be very, very well served if we had, as our elected representatives, human beings of the caliber of State Senator Cynthia S. Green and State Representative Frank I. Smisek. Even though they had a constituent that was a young Chinese man who had very little in the way of material assets and even less in the way of political connections, and even though he was in jail halfway around the world, both these distinguished legislators never lost sight of their constituents. And every day, day in and day out for 5 years, they lent the support of their office to Dr. Yang and his family, Christina Fu, and their 2 children, Anita and Aaron. They never lost sight of the vision that Dr. Yang had for his freedom. And even though this is a welcoming ceremony for Dr. Yang, at his request, he also wants to celebrate this as an occasion for thankfulness and remembrance. So in that spirit of thankfulness, by your applause, I'd like you to give a rousing welcome to Representative Frank I. Smisek and Cynthia S. Green. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. And as we welcome home and honor a remarkable resident of the Commonwealth and of the town of Brookline. Dr. Yang Jianli is a survivor of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. He's a longtime advocate for democracy and human rights. And today we're formally welcoming him back. Grateful and happy that he's here and has returned home after 5 years spent as a political prisoner in China. Dr. Yang Jianli, welcome. You have fought to advance the cause of democracy around the world. To further the march of freedom, you refused to be intimidated, and despite great pressure, returned to China in 2002 to document grassroots democracy movements on the ground. You risked much, and as testified by your 5 years as a political prisoner in China, we know that you sacrificed much. Today we stand in Nurses Hall, a monument to freedom that this country struggled to win in our own Civil War. Also, we stand in the Massachusetts State House, where every day we experience the real and often very messy practice of democracy. There could be no greater spot from which to honor you for your work on human rights for all people. Your courage inspires us, and your determination renews our commitment to this fragile experiment that is self-government. As you begin your 500-mile Gongmin walk to Washington, D.C., let me simply say, we are with you. You're an example to us all. Thank you for your leadership, and on behalf of Speaker DeMacy and the entire Massachusetts House of Representatives, I wish you good luck. Let me turn the mic now over to Senator Green. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Wow, this is awesome. This is great. I'm honored to be able to stand here and welcome Dr. Yang to the State House. To many, this building represents a symbol of American fight for democracy and promise. Thus, it's only fitting that this is where we welcome you back to the United States. and now wish you good luck on your journey to Washington. Democracy takes work, hard work. It requires sacrifice, a lot of sacrifice, as well as participation. And Dr. Yang, I am sure, is more aware of this than most. While democracy is still undoubtedly different in Boston than in Shanghai, the ideals are identical in both places. Citizens must be given a voice to participate in government and to enter the public debate. Government and government officials must be held accountable for their actions and answer to the electorate. As evidenced by the accountings of Dr. Yang, it is obvious that these principles are still under siege, and people like Dr. Yang are still vital for the survival of those ideals. We are lucky to be here in this country, and we are lucky to have you, Dr. Yang, back here to represent all that's good and important, and together we'll always be on the side of democracy. I know you have a long walk ahead of you, but you are not someone that just walks the walk. You're someone that talks the talk, and that's what's important, and that's what's different. So again, on behalf of the Senate President Murray and the legislature, we're really proud of you, and we're really proud if we can make this little small part of your big, of what's a very big and important ideal. So again, thank you very much, and I'm honored, very honored to be here today.
I just want to take a moment to recognize a few of my colleagues and initiatives for China who have labored to pull this event together. First and foremost, Linda Mancini, who was worked very closely. Elaine O'Malley, who was our media writer extraordinaire. And that distinguished silver-haired gentleman in the background there is Mr. Stephen Williamson. I've worked with Steve for many years in many situations, and he's always able to come up with a rabbit out of the hat at the last moment. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. The next speaker I'm really privileged to introduce. There's very few men and women who have the privilege of practicing before the bar to present a list of clients and a list of accomplishments as Jared Genson. There's even fewer people that can list among their clients so many people that are so devoid of anything except that they are victims of repression around the world. And Jared Genson, as president of Freedom Now, has lent his time and talent so generously in the cause of freedom and the downtrodden. And it looks like he's a little bit running late. There he is. Dr. Yang, I'm sure, will say that he is most fortunate to have Jared as a friend, and he's flown in here from Washington to be with us today. So please give him a rousing welcome.
Thanks so much for the kind introduction. My name is Jared Genson. I run a nonprofit organization called Freedom Now. About a decade ago, Yang Lee and I, a little over a decade ago, were classmates together at the Kennedy School of Government. And in the fall of 1997, former Chinese President Jonson came to campus to protest. We came to protest, but Jonson came to the campus, and he originally announced that he was not going to take any questions, and Harvard announced that it wasn't going to allow any protesters on campus. And I first met Yang Lee in some of the organizational meetings for those protest events. And we turned out about 5,000 protesters to protest Jiang Zemin's presence on the Harvard campus and to have our voices heard, both as Harvard students, as people in the community in Boston, and from across the country, that China's human rights abuses were known by the rest of the world, they were not approved of, and that while Harvard may have rolled out the red carpet for Jiang Zemin, there are many of us who are paying attention. For me, meeting Yang Jianli at that time was an inspirational moment, along with many of the other protesters. He had been, of course, in Tiananmen Square himself and had witnessed what had taken place. And it was that experience which, for me, persuaded me to go to law school to become a human rights lawyer. And so imagine, to my surprise, back in 2002, when having indeed followed through on my desire to become a human rights lawyer and running a little NGO with few resources, I learned that Yang Jianli had returned to China to witness labor unrest in the northeast part of the country, and had indeed been detained. And while I didn't feel, frankly, 1 year out of law school all that prepared to go up against the People's Republic of China, I knew that I had no choice. And with Christina Fu and her family, and with so many of you here today, we fought a long and hard and valiant struggle to secure Yang Jianli's release from prison in China. And it was indeed a very happy moment last summer, last August, to see Yang Jianli and his wife Christina reunited in Boston Logan Airport after so many years apart, having only seen each other twice in person over a 5-year period of time. The state legislature here in Massachusetts was tremendously supportive. Congressman Barney Frank was tremendously supportive. The U.S. House and Senate unanimously adopted resolutions calling for his release. The United Nations said that his detention was illegal and in violation of international law. And in many respects, I myself have grown up in the 5 years that it took to fight for Yang Jianli's freedom. So it is indeed with great pleasure that I'm here today with all of you to celebrate his return home and the return to his work. Let me just conclude by quoting American sociologist Margaret Mead, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And Yang Jianli is one of those thoughtful, committed citizens of China who dreams to bring freedom, democracy, and human rights to his people. And it is indeed my honor to be associated with him, to have him as a friend, as a former classmate. And indeed, I look forward to what he will be able to achieve in the years to come, and hopefully someday soon we will all be in Beijing celebrating a free and democratic China.
Thank you, Jerry. Wow. I guess in another time, in another place, this next speaker would be a distinguished legislator in his own right. A brilliant man, a man with a lot of hope. But fate had a different course for this young man. He's not so young, but everything is relative, right? It is my distinct pleasure to hopefully someday count this gentleman as among my friends. But I'd like to turn the podium over to Mr. or Dr. Fang Chengdu. How did I do? For those of you who do not know, Dr. Fang Chengdu is the organizer and student leader behind the Tiananmen Square student protest. For his brave efforts in his struggle to bring democracy to China, he has paid a big price. He is forever banned, as long as the Chinese regime is in power in China, from returning to his home country. So let's give him a big welcome.
Thank you, Representative Smiley and Senator Crane. If you don't mind, I will first speak in Chinese to all my friends, Chinese friends here, both here and in mainland China, then speak in English. 今天很荣幸参加麻省州议会为杨建利博士举办的欢迎会。这个欢迎会足以证明杨建利博士在波士顿地区的重要性。这不仅是因为他的2个博士学位，也不只是因为他在中国的监狱里面坐了5年的牢，更是因为他本身的人格魅力、远见和坚持不懈的努力。15年前，我与建利就是在波士顿初次相识。这么多年，虽然我主要是在巴黎和纽约，但我还是很关心建利在波士顿这边的活动，也曾参与过他在这里组织的一些活动，并且和他合写过一些文章。通过这么多年的了解和认识，我发现建利不仅是一个重义气、讲信用的朋友，更是一个非常优秀的组织者。他的性格随和而宽容，做事勤勉且善于经营，这使他能够取得民主力量的各个方面的信任，因此是一个很好的协调人。我相信从优秀的组织者和协调人中，才能遴选出真正的民主的领袖的人才，而建立则具备成为未来中国民主力量领袖的潜力。这也是我同许多中国的异议人士讨论后得到的一个共识。建立的重要性在于，它是2方面的桥梁，它既是联系中国反对派各派力量的桥梁，又是连接西方支持中国民主化力量与国内反对派之间的桥梁。建立这2方面的桥梁作用，对未来中国民主力量的健康发展，乃至中国和平民主转型的健康发展，都具有非常深远的意义。中国大陆朝向民主的和平过渡，在未来几十年将是全世界关注的大事，不仅对中国利益深远，对全世界也举足轻重。虽然中国大陆的人权灾难每天都在发生，但这不足以使中国共产党自己结束一党专制。中国的民主转型还需要中国自身的民主力量的不断推动，以及西方民主国家的足够的压力。而这后面2方面，正是建立能够发挥自己特长的地方。因此，各位对建立的支持，就是对中国民主力量的支持，也就是对中国健康的民主转型的支持，最终也是为自己免遭纳粹德国那样的专制政权荼毒的一种努力。谢谢各位。I feel deeply honored to be invited to speak here at the reception of Dr. Yang Jianli. I've known Jianli for 15 years. For 15 years, he has been not only a good friend, true and sincere, but also an excellent organizer and coordinator for our cause. And it's my firm belief that Dr. Yang Jianli is the right person who will take a leading position in our struggle for democracy and freedom. Dr. Yang is the much-needed bridge between the many different groups of Chinese dissidents, and he also serves as the much-needed bridge between democracy activists inside and outside of China. This is not because he has 2 PhDs. Neither is it because he was a political prisoner for 5 years in China, but because he has a clear vision and a steady action. Dr. Yang is an inspiration to all who have the privilege of knowing him. I believe that supporting Dr. Yang in his work toward a peaceful transition to democracy in China is important to humanity as the forces of freedom that came together in the last century that defeat Nazi Germany. Thank you very much. seconds.
I'm honored to introduce to you Pema Sewang Shastri. He is the chairman of the board of the Tibetan Association of Boston. I've been honored to know him for 10 years and to see his good work with the community. In the 10 years that I've been aware of the cause of Tibetans and human rights in China, I've been honored to work with many people in the community. It's a treasure to have Pema with us today and working for the community. His consistency, his energy, his bright mind, and also the fact that he's built the bridge with John Lee, and that John Lee is building the bridge with the Tibetan community. It gives me hope for change of the Chinese government, for the transition to a peaceful, democratic China. So please, Pema Sewang Shastri will speak to us now. Thank you.
Representative Frank and Senator Cynthia and my American, Chinese and Tibetan brothers and sisters. I'm really very happy to be standing here today. Linda gave me 2 minutes for this speech, so I'll be very, very brief. Dr. Yang Genli is not only a scholar, human rights activist, democracy advocate, and a courageous person, but also a very good and trusted friend of Tibetans for the last many years. So first of all, I personally, and on behalf of the Tibetan community of Boston, would like to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to him for what he is and for what he has been doing tirelessly for many years. I'm also here to sincerely support his his initiative for China project and the planned walk from Boston to DC. Mahatma Gandhi has once said, "You must become the change you wish to see in the world." Gandhi practiced what he preached and brought freedom to India. So did Dr. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. I am therefore very encouraged and inspired by the motivation, determination, and the sacrifice of Dr. Yang Genli in planning this historic walk of 500 miles, not only to educate the American public of the denial of civil liberties in China and garner support for human rights and democracy, but also to uncover the lies and propaganda of the Chinese Communist Party and articulate the aspirations of the millions of voiceless people of China. I pray and hope that the freedom echoes of your each step of the work will be heard through the brick of Zhongnanhai and compel the CCP leadership to think twice in the future before they make any authoritarian decision that serves only the interests of the CCP. I hope that the truth and the power of your voice will transform the stubborn head of the CCP into acknowledging its mistakes, and the light of your wisdom will soften the iron heart of the CCP leaders. I also wish you the complete success of your selfless endeavor and pray that it brings forth freedom, democracy, and peace in China and in Tibet. all the best for your journey and be safe. The prayers and good wishes of all the Tibetans are always with you. And as a symbol of our everlasting love, purity, and greeting, I would like to offer the traditional Tibetan kata. Dr. Yang. Thank you very much. Coincidentally, the scarf is not cut, so therefore it shows our binding. And as there is a very famous saying that behind every great man there is a woman. So therefore, I would like to offer this
is a distinguished Harvard Fellow of the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, a noted author, and regional director of Amnesty International. He's one of the individuals to rise to Dr. Yang's cause immediately upon learning of his imprisonment, and he never let go of the vision of returning Dr. Yang to safety until it was accomplished. So I'm pleased to welcome Joshua Rubenstein to the podium to introduce Dr. Yang.
I also want to begin my remarks by paying tribute to Christina Fu and the children. Both a privilege and a burden over the years to work with so many families whose loved ones are in trouble, are in jail, or facing even worse conditions than our friend Dr. Yang Li faced. And it's always remarkable to me to work with people who maintain their emotional and moral clarity under very difficult circumstances. So I also want to pay tribute to Christina and the children today as I begin my remarks. Thank you. Gathered here today, and in the months leading up to the Summer Olympics in China, there are a number of things in our mind, of course. The ongoing repression directed against human rights defenders, including internet activists and human rights lawyers, people defending those with AIDS and HIV infection in China. But it's also important to remember that there's a long and sorry history connected to the Olympic Games. China is not the first repressive country to host the Olympics. No one forgets what happened at the 1936 Games in Berlin. But we should not forget that 40 years ago in Mexico, in our hemisphere, hundreds of people were shot down in a public square in Mexico City in protests that were directly connected to the presence of the Olympic Games in Mexico. We remember the boycott directed against the Soviet Union in 1980 in the wake of the invasion of Afghanistan. And the Soviets used the presence of the Summer Olympics to clear out dissidents and other activists from Moscow in the same way we see China doing today. And we should not be complacent, because even when the United States hosts the Games, as we have done in recent years in Atlanta and in Los Angeles, civic authorities find it useful to move out street people, to move out homeless, because they want the city to look nicer for that week or two while the international community is focused on their city, on their community. Now, we have to make clear to China, even as these games unfold, that China cannot allow itself to pretend it's a democracy just for those 2 weeks. Now we're hearing there's pressure that the internet should be available, should be open. Why? Because foreign journalists can't do their job without the internet. Well, what makes foreign journalists so special? Obviously, they should have full access to the internet. They should have their freedom of expression. But we don't believe that there's a special category of people who should have a privilege that should be available to everyone. And not as a privilege, but as a right. And that's our simple message to China today. I think this is also the message that's very much at the heart of Dr. Yang Jianli's career. It's why he went back to China 6 years ago. It's why he was so interested in worker unrest and conditions workers face. It's why we're here today, to pay homage to him for the sacrifice he made and for his enduring commitment to this issue. So it's with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dr. Yang Jianli to us.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank each and every of today's speakers for their very kind words, and more than this, for their persistent efforts to get me released when I was a political prisoner in China. I also want to thank State Representative Frank Smythe, State Senator Cindy Prim, for holding this wonderful celebration of freedom at this beautiful State House for me and my family, and in a symbolic sense for all those Chinese people who do not yet enjoy the freedom that is their right, just as it is the right of every citizen of the world. Many Americans, people, and organizations came to my aid while I was in prison. Many of them. From my neighbors in Brooklyn to the national leaders in Washington, D.C., from my sons and daughters' elementary school to Harvard University, from the grassroots rights groups to the U.S. Congress, from personal friends to compassionate strangers, from lawyers to journalists, from my Christian brothers and sisters in Massachusetts to American diplomats in Beijing. It is impossible to thank them one by one, and I cannot thank any of them enough. If it were not for these dedicated Americans, I would not be standing here as a free man. For that, I offer my deepest and most humble gratitude for all the support you have given me and my family during my very dark days in my 5 years in prison. With my heart so full of gratitude for my adopted country, the United States of America, I have often reflected what would have happened had I gone to another country to further my studies instead. When I went back to China in 2002 and detained without due process, and then sentenced to 5 years as a political prisoner, where would I be now? I'm certain that after hearing from my wife Christina, my second country, whichever that would be, would have taken an interest in my plight, and would have done everything it could have to get me safely released. Yet, would everything it could have done have been enough? Or might I still be languishing in prison, along with countless other prisoners, my health failing, as one's health tends to fail in Chinese prisons? Would I be on my way to dying there? The truth is, this great country, the United States of America, my adopted country, might well be the only country on earth with both the moral conscience and the political strength to have been able to get me safely home. It is said that with power comes responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. This great country, the United States of America, must continue to demand that the Chinese government stop repressing its citizens. And what a better opportunity could there be than in the time leading up to the Olympics in Beijing? You might be aware that this is the second attempt of Chinese government to win the coveted goal of Olympic host. Its first attempt in 1991, in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre, was denied. 10 years later, with the harrowing cries of the victims of Tiananmen failed and almost forgotten, its second attempt was successful. But I stand here now knowing that there are still thousands of smaller Tiananmen squares across China. And I stand here today now knowing that the Chinese Olympic slogan, "One World, One Dream," is the farthest thing from the truth in China. For I dare say that the Chinese government's dream is not the same as the dream of Mr. Hu Jia's activist wife, Zheng Jinyan, and their 3-month-old daughter, who have now been under house arrest for more than 200 days. If convicted, Hu Jia will join Olympic dissidents, including Yang Chunli, who was sentenced last week to 5 years in prison for his involvement for a petition, "We want human rights, not Olympics," signed by farmers protesting land seizures. Nor is it the same dream as the dream of Ye Guozhou, who is serving a 4-year prison sentence for organizing protests against the Olympics-related forced evictions, and Wang Ling, sentenced to 15 months of re-education in November 2007 for opposing the demolition of her property for an Olympics-related project. Does she and the Chinese government share the same dream? The list goes on. Think of Qin Guangchen, the blind rural activist from my hometown, who was sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in prison for his exposing forced abortions and sterilization in eastern China. Or Dr. Wang Bingzhang, who was abducted in Vietnam by China's secret agent and detained secretly for 6 months before his arrest was even announced, and later sentenced to life in prison. Mr. Xuan Li is with us in the audience. Please stand up. Was in prison for 15 years for his leadership in what we call democracy war movement. He was kept for 15 years in prison, and after his first release, and arrested again for his attempt to form an opposition party in China, and was kept for another 5 years before he finally sent to the United States. Ask Xun Li, what is his dream? Is his dream same as the dream of Chinese government? Think of the Tibetan monks, with unknown numbers of them slaughtered just last month. Everybody watched that. What is their dream? Think of Falun Gong practitioners. What is their dream? Think of underground house church members. What is their dream? Is it the dream, the one dream of the Chinese government? No, that is not their dream. It is their nightmare. One world, one nightmare might be the more appropriate slogan for the Chinese people whose thirst for basic rights and dignity is akin to the barren, parched desert where it never rains. I lived in this nightmare for 5 years in prison. When I called out to my God, I was beaten down by the guards. But now I stand before you, fully awakened from my nightmare, a free man in a free country, with a heart so full of gratitude that I fear it might burst. But how can I ever express this thanksgiving for all the support and the hard work that you and so many other Americans gave so generously to help me be released? How can one say thank you for one's life and liberty using only words when words, no matter how lovely and sincere, no matter how often repeated, could never be enough? I must thank you in such a way that you will know it comes right from my heart. In February of this year, I founded Initiatives for China, 公民力量 in Chinese, which means citizen power. We are dedicated to empowering the citizens of China by sowing the seed of hope and giving voice to their struggles for initiating a peaceful transition to a democratic China. We are now busy at work on a daily basis, with an electric energy surging through our staff and volunteers. Some may say we are engaging in dreams that will never come to fruition, but I like to think that every day we are throwing a little more tea in the harbor. You may have noticed this small blue and yellow ribbon that I'm wearing on my lapel. We are introducing this ribbon today as a symbol for the great needs for human rights in China. Yellow is the color of my homeland, and the yellow part is shaped in Chinese character Yin, which means human. And the blue is for the open sky. So the ribbon is in the shape of an English R. Stretch a little bit. Standing for rights. So this ribbon says, the Chinese people, under the blue sky of creation, are entitled to human rights. I ask that you join with us in wearing this ribbon to make clear to the Chinese government that they must stop repressing their citizens. I'm most pleased to be here in Boston today as I announce Initiative for China's Common Action. This May 4th, I will walk 500 miles to Washington, D.C. to thank America for all you have done for me and to remember those still imprisoned in China. We are calling this walk Gongmin Walk, which means citizen and citizen power. My presence here today is testimony to the power of free citizens speaking freely in a free country. It is the citizen power that will keep the hopes of the Chinese people alive and ultimately bring about a peaceful transition to a democratic China. My journey will commence here in Boston. As Boston goes, so goes the nation. As the nation goes, as America goes, so goes the world. And I will walk through Wellesley, Providence, New Haven, Bridgeport, New York, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore. On June 4th, the 19th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, I will conclude my journey in Washington, D.C. Along the way, I will speak out on the human rights situation in China. I will make critical call for continued moral leadership from the United States. I will speak out on land grabbing, on Tibet, Darfur, on Falun Gong practitioners, on political prisoners, and I will speak about the need for conditional participation in the upcoming Olympics. Once again, I find myself humbly asking for your generous support with this vast endeavor. I will be posting my route and whereabouts online and welcome you to join me in my journey on Hello World. The address is printed in today's program leaflet. We will broadcast the walk live every day, and I encourage you to talk about my walk, to blog about it, and to message me, to spread the word, and to some miles with me. Yes, it will take much help and support and the power of the free citizens in America for me to complete this Gongmin Citizen Walk. This event today is also being broadcasted live all over the world on Hello World. I'm told it will even be broadcast in China if it can make it through the great firewall of the Chinese internet police. So I would like to take a minute to say something to all my Chinese compatriots right now.
亲爱的同胞们，我将于5月4日开始徒步行走，6月4日抵达华盛顿。这个徒步行活动叫做公民行，从5·4到6·4。我坚信，中国的希望在于公民精神的觉醒和公民力量的成长。亲爱的同胞们，让我们一起宣誓：不做恶官，不做暴政的帮凶，不做奴隶，也不做暴民。我们要做公民。中国将由于公民精神的觉醒而文明，中国将由于公民力量的成长而民主，中国将由于成为公民社会而成为真正伟大的国度。In addition to introducing Gongmin Walk, I said to them, my dear fellow compatriots, I believe that our country's hope lies in the awakening of a citizen spirit and the growth of a citizen power. Let us not be accomplices of the tyranny. Let us not be slaves nor mobs. Let us be citizens. China will be civilized with the weakening of the citizen spirit. China will be democratized with the growth of citizen power. And China will be a truly great nation when our society becomes a civil society. Now, knowing a little man has helped me figure out how many steps my 500-mile journey will add up to. And averaging my stride at 22.5 inches, I calculate that I will walk 1,408,000 steps. I will walk 1,408,000 steps as a free man with a heart full of gratitude for my wonderful adopted country, the United States of America, and a soul full of hope for a better future of China, my homeland. I thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Robert Honeysuckle will sing for us. Please join us now at the microphone. Thank you very much.
Afraid of the dark.
a Starbucks after that. Thank you. Nice finish. And indeed, Dr. Young will never walk alone with your help. So please tune in to helloworld.com/GoMinWalk, okay, where you can virtually participate in a walk with Dr. Young, 500 miles from D.C. from Boston to D.C. Please be with us in spirit, and we appreciate your support. And please help yourself to some refreshments over there if you'd like to talk with us and learn more about initiatives for China. We're available to you. Thank you so much.